Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of 52 Amazing Authors, 52 Weeks. Today, I am joined by Harris Eddie Hill, one of many authors in the book 28 Stories from the Section 28 Generation, with contributions from 28 LGBTQIA plus writers and creatives. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Lisa. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this platform. And I have to tell you, and I think I told you this before we went live, I did not read all of the chapters. I only read your chapter. And what was so, and I didn't tell you this before we started recording, I'll tell you now because I like for the element of surprise. What really drew me to your chapter once you scheduled the interview was the title. And the title of your chapter is The Unbearable Weight of Silence. And the reason why that chapter really got to my heart is because as the growth motivator, that's what I'm known as, I encourage individuals and organizations to shed the weight that's holding them hostage. So when I see the word weight, it immediately makes me kind of teary-eyed because I personally know about carrying weight that holds you back. You know, those days I think about me in my car driving, crying, right? I think about sitting in the tub crying because of weight that I was holding that, once I let go, I was like, why were you holding it all that time? But I know a little something about some unbearable weight. But everybody's weight is different, right? And so let's talk a little bit about, before we get into the book, let's talk about your background, because I have some questions about your background that
Yeah,
I'm sure our audience will want to know, especially as a neurodivergent.
sure thing.
That's a
So,
term that many people have not heard before.
no. So, I'm an unusual person, not on purpose. I think it's just how I was created, how I arrived in the world. I'm unconventional in a lot of different ways. Um, I think the most kind of, I guess, if we're talking about social justice, obviously I'm completely white passing, so I think that's kind of like the most, I guess, privileged thing about me. But my background, I come from a mixed race family. I've got Asian, Southeast Asian, specifically Indian background as well as white. And I'm neurodivergent, which means for me personally, it means I've got ADHD and autism, um, which in some ways is a challenge, and in other ways, I find it a gift. It allows me to get obsessed about things and then get really good about them. Um, and I'm also non-binary, which means I don't fit the man or the woman box. It was just as much a surprise to me as anyone else. Um, but yeah, I think finding out that I'm different in a lot of ways has allowed me to kind of come home and be comfortable and happy. I think a lot of people think about being different as it being a difficulty or a challenge, but I think of it as being home and being free and feeling comfortable. I definitely feel it's the opposite.
Wow. First of all, I always say on these episodes, I am not going to cry. And one of the things that I love about them, because these episodes are so authentic, in the book, in the preface to your chapter, you talk about that at the time of writing the book, you were 34, right? And the book was published 2023. My 32-year-old daughter is special needs. She's autistic, but she's low functioning autistic. And when I think about all the times that I was out and about with her and people looked at her because she's different, um, it bothers me that people won't just allow us as individuals to be who we are. Why we always have to judge, right? Like for me as a mother, oh, what did she do wrong that her daughter came out that way, right? She doesn't hear, she doesn't talk. What did I do wrong, right? Not really knowing my story. They just make assumptions. Oh, she's an African American woman. Surely she had poor prenatal care, right? Just all the things that people make up in their head without knowing the truth. You mentioned that you're part white and there's this certain assumption of privilege. Well, let me just tell you, I have a lot of white friends who will tell me on a regular basis, I grew up just like you. And honestly, when they first told me that, I'm like, no way. No way you grew up just like me. Oh, yeah. I was the product of a divorced family, right? My mother had little to nothing coming up. But mainstream media will have us believe that this privilege means you had it all when that's not always true.
No, I think, I used to be very active in the intersectional space. It's not really my focus anymore, but I've still taken a huge amount of learning from that. And I think it's sort of the whole point of it being intersectional is that just because you have one thing, like, you if you didn't get bullied for being white, or you don't have comments made about you for being white, doesn't mean you didn't have all of the other things like poverty and abuse and food insecurity and all of that stuff. So I wasn't saying it to kind of suggest I had it all, but rather just to say that's one thing I don't get bullied for, I guess.
Oh no,
But
I got it, but I
yeah.
had to make it plain for some other people because I think some
uh
people, people have these assumptions, and I call them ignorance, right? They just think one way, and nothing you say is going to make them think any different about anything.
mm,
And to me, that's a horrible way to live life.
yeah, it is. I definitely can't function that way, but I think in my work, so nowadays I'm a trauma practitioner. And one of the conversations that comes up so much with my clients and also in my own life is about emotional immaturity, and how people who are not highly emotionally matured struggle with nuance, complexities, and they like things that are black and white. They like things that are really easy to categorize, and anything outside of that actually makes them deeply uncomfortable and actually a bit scared sometimes. So folks like that don't tend to be open to more complex ideas.
Well, I learned at the tender age of 50, I'm 51 now,
No way.
that in order to, and I don't look 51, do I? Not at all. In fact, we look the same age.
Yeah.
But I made the decision to become comfortable being uncomfortable. And
Mm,
that's where I've seen my life go to the next level. I've always been, an open person, an open book, right? And so for some people it's like, oh, you told too much. And for others it's like, thank you for sharing.
mm,
Because I was bold enough to share, right? Some people take some stuff to the grave that is really weight that's holding them down.
yeah, 100%.
So you are a best-selling author, podcaster, non-binary mental health coach. Your coaching business has to be like a waiting list.
That's so kind of you. It will be eventually. I've not been running yet for a whole year, and I've had some health stuff which has kind of slowed me down a little bit. I've been taking some time very intentionally, and I'm also writing my first solo book. So maybe you can have me back in the future if you decide that you've got the energy to do this ever again.
Listen, let me tell you something. I plan to do 52 authors, 52 weeks until I die.
Nice.
You know why? I have had the privilege of meeting individuals from around the globe that I would have never had an opportunity to meet if it wasn't for this platform. And I am all about this series week after week, year after year, being so diverse that we start to have conversations that we did not have before, all because we were vulnerable, right? Some podcasters, they make you do like an interview before, and then they decide if they want to have you. I literally put the call out, you sign up, you show up, we go through the interview, and it's there. That's what the world needs. We time out for all the reality TV shows, right? We need
Yeah.
real people talking about real things.
Yeah. Agreed.
So I'm speaking over your life that your coaching business is going to be booming because and I'll tell you more about my day-to-day work once we finish recording, because everybody don't need to know all my business, all your business, right? But we have so many things from a connection perspective that really I'm comfortable doing it. So what made you, because I always like to ask the question, like, what made you want to write to tell your story?
I've always written since I was a kid. Growing up, there are loads of books that I started writing from the age of about 10. I started writing books and never finished any of them. But and I've been part of a writing group. We meet socially like most weeks, local to me on a Thursday evening, and we bring our works in progress. And it had become really obvious to me that I wanted to I wanted to be published. I wanted to be out in the world. And I think I have quite it's in my nature to want to help people and kind of share what I know and to be open. Like, I don't, people often say in interviews, the interviews where I've talked a lot about like my own trauma story and how I got into my trauma work, and they say, oh, it must take a lot of courage to say that. But the truth is that it doesn't, because I've got no filter and I don't care. um so I was already published in another anthology before that one, and it was my first go at it. um and I was like, yeah, it was okay, but I want to go again. And I saw this post, someone might have even sent it to me or tagged me in it or something, asking for authors who grew up in the UK and were schooled in the UK between the years of 1988 and 2003, because they were looking for co-authors for this book about growing up during the Section 28 era. Now, I fit the bill, but I didn't know what Section 28 was. I'd never heard of it. And I was like, well, I want to write again, and this sounds like me, but I don't really know what they're talking about. So I think I went on YouTube and I watched a couple of videos, like sort of short documentaries about Section 28. And it was basically that in 1988, our then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and her sort of government passed a law that made it illegal to acknowledge or discuss homosexuality in schools, by the teachers, basically. So from 1988, and then it got repealed in Scotland in 2000, and then the rest of the UK repealed it in 2003. So I'm 36 now, and it was the year that I was born, was the year that that bill passed. And then when I was 15, and I had already realized that I was queer, for lack of a better term, um, the year before it got repealed. And obviously, we all know that just because a law changes, it doesn't mean society changes to keep up with it. It takes a long time for that to kind of filter through, many years. So not only did I not know what the law was, I didn't know the law had been repealed, and I didn't know that it was now legal for teachers or school to acknowledge it. Otherwise, I think I would have had a different experience. I was getting bullied at school a lot, as were a lot of other kids. Even if you showed anything that people could construe as being maybe a bit gay or whatever, um, that was it. The bullies would pick up on that straight away. And as a result of all of this going on, the teachers weren't allowed to acknowledge it if they knew you were getting bullied because of, who you may be attracted to, even if you've not said anything. teachers couldn't acknowledge that or do anything about it. So it was like the Wild West. It was like the teachers' hands were tied. And once I realized that this was everything that I'd been through was as a result of a law that I didn't even know about, that like blew my mind. And I was like, I have to share this because I'm pretty sure that most of the other kids at school didn't know that either. One of my best friends is 10 years older than me, so that would have gone into play for her when she was 12, I think, or 10 or 12. Anyway, so her entire secondary school, like high school experience would have been very much colored by this, and she also had no idea. Um, so it's amazing how, and she's straight, you know, she has, and yet she came to the book launch of this book in London, and afterwards she came out looking very thoughtful. Um, and I said, how do you feel? She said, I'm really, really pissed off because my entire school experience was dictated by a law that's just stupid and short-sighted. And it meant that we were all robbed of having a full experience with all the people that we were friends with and shared hours and hours a week of our lives with, years of our lives with. We didn't get to have the full experience. So I don't think that this is an issue of just for queer people. I think this is an issue for everyone. You know, lives are all the richer for diversity, as we know. Um, Even from a problem solving point of view, a team with the most diversity will have the best pool of problem solving ability. And we know this. It was one of the reasons that Mars One, which was a project that unfortunately I think has failed, but one of the reasons they were so that diversity wasn't just something nice they wanted to do for putting their teams together to go up to Mars, but so that it was essential to their survival. And I think this is one of the things that I wanted to get through, you know, messaging in the book for the readers so that they understand that every time we are, I guess, segregated or we're pushed to the side or we're told to be quiet or we're even stripped of the vocabulary to even tell someone what's happening or to identify this kind of oppression, which is what I cover in the book. It's dangerous and it does a huge amount of damage. I mean, even to the point that nowadays you get a lot of folks who are maybe a bit more traditional or conservative saying that people like me are a new idea when we've been around for thousands of years. Um, and I very much believe in the phrase that none of us is free until we're all free. And this book really, I felt, called me to act on my beliefs and to put put my words into the world and stand behind them.
I love it. I love it. Um, so much to unpack, and we only have 30 minutes. But one of the things that you said that really kind of, I don't know, just hit me like a ton of bricks was we won't all be free until we understand each other.
Mm,
Is that ever going to happen? Like in our lifetime, is that ever going to happen? Because we spend so much time judging someone and not, I mean, and I'll give you a perfect example. So I have two twin cousins who are lesbian, and one of them announced that they were getting married. And so I was like, it's my cousin. I'm going to the wedding, right? And the only people who went to the wedding were my husband and I, and then my aunt, everybody's favorite aunt. She went, but she wouldn't get on a plane. So we had to drive her from Chicago to DC. And so we get to the wedding. And first of all, the wedding was the setup. All the details that went into the wedding were amazing. And as I sat in the front row as her only, besides my aunt, her only blood relative, I was hurting because I didn't understand why my good old Baptist family didn't believe in same-sex marriage and chose not to come to the wedding. Love is beautiful. And when I watched her give her vows that day, and I look at her fast forward 10 years now, and I see my little cousins that they have produced, and I see the love that they have for each other, I say, some of you heterosexual couples could learn from the love. Not to say, because there's problems in all couples, right? But the love that they share, the love that they've given my little cousins is priceless.
Mm.
And when we entered the wedding and I saw it was mostly women, didn't bother me. My husband was like, whoa, it's a lot of women in here, right? He was excited. But the experience was one that I was glad that I had an opportunity to experience. And then fast forward, I had an opportunity, and I audit medical records. And so I had an opportunity to get a new client whose patient population is 99%, 99% LGBTQIA plus. And I'm so grateful that I went to my cousin's wedding because I was able to walk into the clinic feeling comfortable and not feeling like the patients were different. The doctors, the nurse practitioners, like I didn't feel like they were different. Now, what did hurt me was reading the trauma that the patients had experienced throughout their lifetime, because I said, people with kidneys and lungs and hearts shouldn't go through that level of trauma. And the trauma is system imposed, people imposed. And when is it going to stop? As an African American woman, I know all about hatred and decades of hatred. But when are we going to realize that at the end of the day, we all have the same organs? It doesn't matter who we like, who we don't like, who we love, who we don't love. We're all people.
I agree. I think it's such a multifaceted issue. I think one thing is that if you are friends with the folks that you're scared of or that you don't agree with, over time you realize it's just all a load of nonsense. Like they're just, there's no issue there. And I think there are people for whom they have been led to believe their entire lives that they would be in danger to even befriend these people, to give them the time of day. So that's a very difficult thing to overcome. And I think that I grew up in the Church of England, and I dabbled a bit with a Baptist church and in an evangelical church when I was like early 20s. And I think there's a lot of fear and a lot of leaders encouraging people to kind of stay separate when, I'm not religious, but there are so many kind of, I always forget words, like contradictions. On the one hand, it's supposed to be your duty to kind of model this really loving behavior and go out and model this loving behavior to everybody and treat everyone equally. And equally at the church, you're also told to be careful about who you associate with, what you allow in your home. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I think all we can do is over time influence our tiny corner of the world to just be accepting and to some degree mind our business and to another degree advocate for each other. And I think that there are so many of us for whom, you and I realize what it is to be discriminated against. And we don't wish that for anybody, even if they belong to groups that aren't ours. Our empathy carries across all of those differences. And to me, that's what should rule all of our decisions and policies and all the rest of it. Without each other, we've got nothing. You could have all the money in the world, but if you didn't have any other people in your life, it wouldn't be worth living.
Oh, I just love you. I'm so happy that we had an opportunity to connect. I can't wait for this episode to air.
Me too.
So let me just tell you, after I read I'm not going to call it your little chapter. After I read chapter 6, I said to myself that there was more that needed to be told. And I don't know about you, but I'm sure chapter 6 was freeing for you, but your own full book is going to be so freeing that you will surprise yourself how freeing it is. We talk about trauma. For me, writing my book uncovered trauma that I had and allowed me to deal with it and move on.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for your book to come out. I'm going to tell Sophia, it's my assistant, to make sure we stay on top of when the book is going to drop, because I don't know the other folks here. I've only had an opportunity to meet you. So I want to know more about your story. And I'm hoping that your story encourages others to write their story.
Yes.
You mentioned you wrote so many books when you were younger, but you never finished any of them. You are not the only one. And some are afraid for the words to be read by others for fear of, what are they going to think about me? Who cares? Who cares what they think about you? There are a lot of people like you, like I, who need to read it. And one thing I want to be very clear about. In the beginning of each chapter, because even though I did not read the other chapters, I did skim through them just because I'm nosy. And nosy because I want to see what's the format, right? Like how each chapter started off. And each chapter started off with some content warnings. And these content warnings, for the most part, are warnings that transcend across all types of sexual orientation.
Yeah.
I too tried to commit suicide, right? So I think we have to take the mask off and just start to be real and open with each other so that we can live the rest of our lives in peace and harmony, irregardless of who we are and who we love, because none of us are perfect. You can have billions of dollars and still be unhappy and still be a horrible person. And so for me, I just want us little people down here, the people who don't have all the millions of dollars, to wrap our arms around each other physically, virtually, and love on each other, because that's what we need to kind of pull back some of all the stuff that we're seeing on the news. I don't know about you, but every time I turn on the news, and I have to admit, I watch the news a lot. Maybe it's the 51-year-old woman in me, but I watch the news at 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., and sometimes 10 p.m. And a lot of it is repeating. But I need for some of that not to be on the news. I need for those things to be resolved. I need for us to be seeing news stories where we're loving each other, we're respecting each other. And, I don't know, my grandfather is currently 103. I don't know if that's going to happen in my lifetime, your lifetime, but if we could just move to that, that would make me so happy. So happy.
Yeah, agreed. I have to say, I gave up watching the news, listening to the news maybe 10 years ago.
Mm,
So I didn't know how that was going to go, but I needed to do it for my sanity. And you know what? I still know what's going on. I just don't, it's just not forced into my brain. It's really different. And I'm no like not really any less informed. It just gets delivered way more gently. So I'm just saying, if anyone just saying if anyone feels like it's too much, it'll be fine if you decide not to watch the news anymore.
yeah, we know what, with Facebook and all the other social media platforms, you can definitely be informed before it hits the news, right? I
Yeah,
remember during the civil unrest during the pandemic here in the States, Facebook is how we found out about everything before it even happened,
yeah,
within seconds.
yeah.
So our time is almost up, but I always like to do two things at the end of each episode. Number one, I'd like to allow the authors to tell our listening, viewing audience where they can find you, even though you're in the UK and I'm in the US. We have passports, we can travel, but we can definitely connect virtually. But how can our listening, viewing audience find you? That's number one. And then number two, this is a different question for you. If you had to tell your younger self something, what would you say?
Oh, okay. So the first thing, if you want to come find me, my full name is Harris Eddie Hill. You can find me online. All my handles are at Mux Harris Hill, which is MX Harris with a double R, Hill with a double L. Um, and you can find all of my social media, my link to my sort of freebies and healing community and stuff on my website, which is muxharrishill.com. I've also got a short list of recommended audio books for survivors of relational trauma on there. Um, so yeah, that's a good place to start. And if I could go back and talk to my younger self, I don't know, this is something I've actually thought about a lot. Um, I don't think I would tell them that they were non-binary. I think they had enough to deal with, and that would have just been, at the time, the community wasn't there, social media wasn't a thing. I was already kind of a bit screwed and on my own. Um, but I might advise my younger self to get more help, to ask for way more support than I asked for, because at that point in my life, I had never had vulnerability and open communication modeled to me. And being autistic, I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to say the thing. I don't know that I'm supposed to say anything or even how that would look. So I spent a lot of my younger years feeling very stuck and afraid and alone, and trying to manage a lot of family life, which was hard. And kind of doing it by myself a lot. So I think it would be more about asking for help, because it's hard enough being a kid and a teenager. You shouldn't have such massive burdens on top of that for things that you're way too young to handle. So that's what it would be for me.
I love it. I love it. I remember as a kid, we were taught never get into the car with a stranger, right? But here we are, 2024. We're getting in the car with strangers because we're in Uber, right? But I don't think we were told enough. It's okay to not be okay. And my grandfather says this all the time. If you need me, call me. And I don't think we do that enough and mean it. If you need
Mm,
me, call me. And let me add to that. If you need me, call me. And whatever it is, I won't judge you for it. I'm just here to listen. And if you need me to give some guidance, if you need me to act on your behalf, I will. But I don't think we do enough of that because we're so self-absorbed that we don't really lean into helping others. And there's so many others that need help.
Yeah, I think we've lost a lot of our sense of community. And also I think it's becoming so much harder to be a self-sufficient human being. Look at the cost to live somewhere versus the average wage. It's so different now. So I think that partly it's attitude and the fact and our sort of modern day culture, but I also think it's partly the fact that a lot of people are fighting for, just to survive, like way more than they used to in many ways. So it's made it way more difficult to be available for each other when we're all exhausted and, often under-resourced.
I agree. I agree. Well, listen, thank you so much for being a part of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. I'm going to say it again. I love you. I thank you so much for being you, for embracing your authentic self. I embrace my authentic self. Sometimes people will say, oh, that's just Lisa. Lisa is Lisa. Lisa shows up as who she is on a regular basis. And it's easier to show up as your authentic self than to put on this mask. And I don't know
Mm,
about you, but I'm tired of the mask. I just want to be Lisa. When I die, I want everybody to say what Lisa's legacy, what she left behind,
yeah,
with
agreed.
no mask on. No mask.
Agreed. And I don't have the energy to pretend either. You get it. You either like it or you don't, and that's fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, everyone, this has been another amazing episode of 52 Authors, 52 Weeks. See you next time. Bye bye.
Cheers.